think one of the toughest things to draw is probably a person's face. So in the next few videos, we're going to be breaking the face up into the different parts and looking at techniques and tricks to make them look more realistic. For our first video, we'll be focusing on the eye. You can click on the link in the description below to download the step-by-step guide that I'll be using for this tutorial. If you want to see links to all the other videos that we'll be doing in this series, you can also find them in the description below. For this tutorial, you're going to need a piece of paper, an HB pencil, and then any of your B shading pencils. I'm using a 4B, but anything with a B at the end will be fine. You will also need an eraser and a ruler. Now, the average eye is actually 2.5 centimeters wide, or roughly an inch. But for today's tutorial, we're going to be making it much larger. When you draw something bigger, it's a lot easier to focus in on those little details and get things just right. But if you wanted to draw a portrait that was to scale, it would need to be around 2.5 centimeters wide. For our tutorial today, we're going to make our eye 15 centimeters wide, so quite a bit bigger. What you're going to do is put your ruler in the middle of the page, about halfway down a horizontal page, and measure off 15 centimeters. This line needs to be really light. We don't want to see it at the end. Okay, so just a nice light line that is 15 centimeters long. While you have your ruler there, we're going to find the midpoint of this line to draw our pupil. So half of 15 is 7.5. We're going to make a mark there. If you are using inches, that would be around 6 inches, and then your midpoint would be at 3. Right, so on this midpoint line, we're going to draw our pupil. So we'll draw a nice circle there for the pupil. And then around that pupil, we'll be drawing our iris. Now, if you were drawing your eye smaller, this iris would be a centimeter in diameter. Because we've made our eye a little bigger, you could probably do 7 centimeters in diameter. So if you would like to mark that off to help you, you can do that. I'm marking 3.5 centimeters on either side of this midpoint. And then if you want to get really technical, you could turn your ruler perpendicular and measure 3.5 centimeters above the line and 3.5 centimeters below the line. And then this gives you 4 points. I've actually taught students who have gotten their compasses out before to draw this, so you can do that if you'd like. Let's join these 4 points together to create our iris. So the iris is the colored part of your eye. I'm turning my page to keep my hand comfortable. It will help you draw a better arc. So just turn the page rather than trying to turn your hand at a funny angle and not drawing nicely. Just move the page around. Okay, once you've done it, I can see this one is not quite right, so I'm just going to fix that. Okay, now that we've drawn our iris, let me just erase this line that was incorrect. We can use it to help us draw the top and the bottom lid. Now, your top eyelid is always covering a little bit of your iris. So when we are drawing the top eyelid, we need to make sure it cuts across some of this big circle that we've just drawn. Okay, so the lid is going to start at the end point, move up to the iris, cut off some of the iris, and then come back down. It will curve up. Cut across the iris and then curve back down. We don't need the top part of this iris anymore, so I'm going to erase it. If you are using construction lines or things that you don't want to be seen at the end of your picture, once you've used them and you don't need them anymore, just erase them. Otherwise, you can get really confused by all these lines that are on your page. So just keep it simple. When you're done with a line, erase it. But the bottom eyelid comes around and follows the shape of your iris. So you can usually see a little bit of white at the bottom of somebody's eye when they look at you. So I'm going to start on the outside edge, follow the shape of the iris. Again, I'm turning my page so that my hand is comfortable. It's quite a big arc, so you need to make sure that your hand is comfortable to do the arc. Okay, I'm not taking it all the way to that line. We're just going to draw a little triangular shaped circle there. That's for the inside of the eye. Right, now that we've got these done, we're going to add the outside of the eyelids. So when somebody's eye is open, you will see a fold at the top of the eye and a fold at the bottom of the eye where the eyelid has gone back. And this shape will almost mirror the lines that we've just drawn, but as you get closer to the outside of the eye, they move further away from the eye. So we're going to start, for this picture, I'm starting about 2 centimeters above the eye. Going to follow the lines that we've just drawn, and as you get to the iris, start moving a little bit further away from the eye. Right, then I'm going to do my bottom line. I'm turning my page around so that my hand is nice and comfortable to do this. Again, we're going to follow the shapes that we've just drawn. So it's going to come up like a curve. Follow the shape of the eye. And then as we get to the iris, you can slowly start moving a little bit away from the eye. Okay, and now we have our eyelids. If you want to add a little bit of dimension to your picture, you can add some shading. So I'm going to get my 4B out, and on this line that I've just drawn, I'm going to draw a nice dark line, pressing quite hard. And as I move away from the line, I'm going to press lighter and lighter. Now in this picture, I'm doing smooth shading, and this one works really well for skin. If you are drawing an eye that's an old, wrinkly man, you might want to try hatching. But if you do smooth shading, that definitely makes the person look younger and more feminine. So it just depends on what kind of eye you're drawing as to the shading that you'll use. So it's nice and dark in this fold. I'm pressing hard, and then as I get away from the fold, I just press lighter and lighter and lighter. Then you can see I'm going back over places more than once. And with shading, that is always a good technique to use. My motto is press light until it's right. So don't go in with really hard shading, rather do a couple of layers of light shading. Okay, and then along the top of the eye, I'm also going to make it slightly darker. Now you want to go quite dark here because we're going to add eyelashes in. And if there's dark shading underneath it, it's going to make the eyelashes look nice and full at the end. If you don't make this shading dark enough, it won't look as full. The eyelashes will look a little bit scraggly. Okay, the other little cheat that I like to do is just rub my finger over the shading to make it look extra smooth. If you find that it's a bit too dark, you can just take your eraser and lighten it up. Obviously here, as the eyelid gets a bit further away from the eye, you can make it lighter. You could also add some shading above the eye. So again, starting dark on the line, getting lighter as it gets further away. I'm holding the pencil almost at the end, and this helps me make sure that as much of the lead as possible is touching the page. This makes the shading much faster and smoother. Okay, I'm going to just go over that with my finger and rub it again. It'll be quite a lot lighter above the eye because that's heading towards the eyebrow, and that's probably a highlight in a person's eyes, the spot here. So don't make it too dark. Most of this shading that we're doing now is going to be covered by the eyelashes later, so please don't get worried if it's not looking exactly the way that you want it to look. Right, let's flip our eye over and do the shading along the bottom, and again it's the same thing, nice and dark on this fold line and then getting slowly lighter in each direction. So I'm pressing really hard, getting a nice dark line, and then as I move away from the line I'm pressing lighter and lighter. Okay, and along the bottom of the eye we're also going to do some dark shading there. Making it lighter as we get into the center. Now, if you would like, you can just rub your finger over this, smooth it out nicely. Just pushing some of the shading out to the edge to blend it off. Okay, and you can also do a little bit of shading underneath that fold line, just really light shading. I'm just going to go around the inside of the eye in this little spot. Again, we'll just do a little darker around the edge, lighter shading in the middle, and I'm just going to do some light coloring here so that we can end this off nicely. If you were drawing a face, you would start blending into the nose at this point, but we're just going to blend it out into the white page to finish our picture off, or end off our picture. Right, now we can start adding our eyelashes. Now the eyelashes should have a curve to them. Don't just draw straight lines coming out of the eye. Your eyelash actually has it's thicker at the bottom, and then it has a flick coming out. The eyelashes are going to be slightly shorter in the beginning, and they'll stick out the most at the top of your eye, and then they'll get slightly shorter again. Another trick for doing eyelashes is don't do them all at the same angle. So here I'm doing these all at a very similar angle, but what you actually need to do is have some of them crossing over, some that are just straight and short, some that are slightly longer. With all of them, I'm adding a little bit of a ball at the top and flicking it out. It's almost like a little tadpole shape, for lack of a better description. You can hear I'm pressing really hard. I'm just flicking my pencil out, making a point of making the eyelashes at slightly different angles, just to make it look a bit more natural. If you have a good look at your eyelashes, you'll see that they all go in a slightly different angle. Some of them are slightly longer, some are shorter. Press as hard as you can when you're making these eyelashes, because your eyelashes are one of the darkest parts of the eye. So some of our darkest shading will be around these eyelashes. You can also press slightly lighter for some of them, just to add a little bit of texture and difference. So variety, it makes things look more realistic. When everything is uniform and the same, it looks a little bit fake. So a couple of eyelashes that are a little bit off course or not quite perfectly curved will go a long way in making your picture look realistic. You can see it's almost a flattened out C shape, and I'm going back and just thickening the base of each lash when I'm done. Okay, now we're going to go and do some really dark shading along the base here. I'm just pressing hard again. So we did shading like this earlier, but we're just adding a little bit more. It will make your lashes look fuller. You might find you have lots of little funny bumps and lumps along the top of the eye, and this can help you smooth them out. You can just color over them and hide them a little bit. Right, and we're going to do along the bottom. Again, aim for this fold line. So I'm just going to space them out. The ones that are in the middle will be slightly straighter. And I have a bit of a curve on this side. So I'm just going, adding a few and then adding extras in between it, thickening the bases. Can make a couple of the lines slightly thicker than others. Sometimes your eyelashes, they'll stick together and they'll make that effect. Okay, the top eyelashes should definitely be a bit longer than the bottom eyelashes, so just keep an eye on that when you're drawing them. Also, obviously different people have different eyelashes. Some people have beautiful, long, thick eyelashes. Other people have shorter, thinner eyelashes. So if you're drawing a particular person, you would need to look at that and decide how you should draw your eyelashes. On that note, people also have very different shaped eyes. So the way that you draw your eyelids would differ if you were copying a specific person or a particular person. Right, so let's start by shading in this pupil. It's a nice and easy one. We're just going to do some dark shading again, and we're just pretty much coloring it in, pressing really hard to get a nice dark line. Don't forget to avoid this little patch of light that we want to add our eyes later. Okay, so we're just shading it in dark, avoiding this little patch of light. Work hard at getting it nice and even and dark. Having a nice dark pupil will set off the rest of the eye. Okay, now that we've done our pupil, we're going to move on to our iris. Now in an iris, it's usually quite dark around the edge and then around the pupil. So we're going to first start with our dark shading around the edge. Make it lighter as you come in. So it's almost like a center ring here would be the lightest part of your iris. I'm moving my page so that I have good range of movement and my hand is comfortable. We've done quite a lot of smooth shading in this eye, but in the iris, it's nice to have little flecks of white sticking through. It just makes the eye look a little bit more alive and shiny. If you think of someone with really sparkly eyes, there's lots of little flecks of light in it. So having a few flecks in this eye will make it look really good at the end. Okay. When it comes to the place where our eyelid has gone over the iris, your eyelid casts a bit of a shadow over your eye. So we're going to have a line of almost dark shading that should end at the top of your really light part. So over here, I'm just going to do some nice dark shading over where the eye is. We will come back to this later once we've shaded in the eye and darken it again. Okay, getting a little bit lighter as we come in. And then again around the pupil, we're going to do quite dark shading and then lighten it up. Okay, now a trick I like to use to show the flecks of color that are in an iris is almost, if you picture a slinky that's been made into a circle and it's just got lots of little swirling slinky lines. That's how I like to shade in an iris. So going really hard here, I'm just making little circles that all roll into each other. And this can be really helpful in creating that effect of the flecks of color that are in an eye. If you were doing this in pencil crayon, you could do it in different colors, so different shades of blue, and that really, or green or brown, whatever color the eye is, it creates a great effect. Don't worry if you go over those bits of light, we can erase them later. So I'm just going now and making a nice clean edge around the outside of the pupil. That needs to be a nice sharp clean line. So if you have gone out the lines like that, or it's a bit skew, you need to just go and cover that up and make it a nice sharp clean line. Okay, and I'm going to just work my shading again a little bit more, add some more dark shading around the edge where the eyelid creates the shadow. And again around the pupil, a little bit of dark shading. Okay, I'm going to take my eraser and just lighten up those little flecks of light. Right, we can come back to this again in a minute. What we're going to do is work on the rest of the eye. Sometimes you don't realize what you need to add to a picture until you add more shading to it. So don't worry if something is not exactly the way that you want it. At the end, when you've finished your picture, you sometimes get a better idea of what's not right and what is right. So let's move on. We're going to draw the bottom eyelid now. So it's just going to run parallel to the bottom of the eye, come just under the iris. Then after the iris, you want to try and make it come closer and closer to the eyelid. In this corner here, we're going to have quite dark shading. It's part of your bottom eyelid. So it's going to be darker in the corner and get a bit lighter as it comes down. And then again, as it gets smaller here, it will be darker and it will get lighter. You can smooth it out a little bit if you'd like. Okay. In the same way that your top eyelid casts a shadow on the iris, it's also going to cast a shadow on the eyeball. So again, we're going to mirror the top eyelid, getting closer as we get to the inside of the eye. Just add a little bit of dark shading there. If you think it's not looking right, you can just rub it with your finger and make it really smooth. Shadows are often done in smooth shading. Okay, What we also want to do to make the eyeball look more rounded is to darken each of the corners, because remember, when you make something dark, it pushes it back, and when something is light, it pulls it forward in the picture. So it just makes it look more three-dimensional. So I'm just going to go into this corner here, add a little bit of dark shading. And into this corner. Such a small little trick, and it can make quite a big difference to an eye. While you're doing this, we drew a line right in the beginning, and if your line is still showing up, just use your eraser to rub it out. We don't want to see that line. We can also do a small shadow along this bottom eyelid, so just slightly darker than the eyelid was. Again, it just makes the eyeball pop out and look three-dimensional rather than flat. Now we're going to have another look at our eye and see, are there improvements that I can make, or am I happy with it? What's not looking right? So I would definitely say I need to darken the eyelashes more. So I'm going to add a little bit more dark shading along these eyelashes. Again, that little bit of dark shading is going to add a lot more dimension, make it look much more realistic and three-dimensional. And I'm going to add some shading to that top eyelid as well. You could add a few more eyelashes in if you wanted to. I'm adding in just really light eyelashes now that are just going to give the eyelashes some body. But again, if you're drawing a specific eye, you would need to look at that person's eyelashes and then decide how you would draw the eyelashes. Okay, I'm also going to just darken the base of these eyelashes. And there you have a pencil sketch eye. If you have any questions about how to draw an eye, please leave them in the comment section below and we'll get back to you. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button. And if you're new, consider subscribing. We put up new videos every week. Our next video in this series about how to draw a face will be on eyebrows. You can watch it here.